The day I sold my dental practice for $8.5 million, I was wearing my old cardigan, the tan one with the fraying cuff that my daughter had been trying to throw away for 3 years. I remember that detail because it felt wrong somehow to be signing papers that changed my life while wearing something so ordinary. My attorney slid the last page across the conference table. I put my pen to it, and just like that, 41 years of work became a number in a wire transfer. I sat in the parking garage afterward for maybe 20 minutes. Just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, engine off. I built that practice from nothing. I was 26 years old when I bought out Dr. Hoffman's retiring patients and rented a 2-room office on Maple Street with brown carpet and a fish tank that kept leaking. I mixed my own composite by hand back then. I knew every patient by name, knew their kids' names, knew who was going through chemo and who just got divorced. 41 years. And now it belonged to a regional dental group out of Columbus who'd already told me they were replacing the waiting room chairs. I should have called my daughter. I should have called my sister. Instead, I called my husband. He didn't pick up. That wasn't unusual. He kept his phone face down during meetings, and he had a lot of meetings. I left a voicemail that probably made no sense. Something like, "It's done. Call me. I love you." And then I decided I would just drive to his office and surprise him. We'd go to dinner. The good place. The Italian one on 5th he'd been wanting to try. We'd order the expensive wine, and I'd tell him every detail, and he'd hold my hand across the table the way he used to, the way he did when I was 32 and terrified, and he told me the practice was going to be fine, I was going to be fine. That's what I was thinking about on the drive over, the good version of us. His firm was 12 minutes from my attorney's office. I'd made that drive hundreds of times over the years, dropping off lunch, picking him up when his car was in the shop, stopping by for no reason at all when the kids were little, and I just wanted to see his face. The receptionist on the ground floor knew me. She smiled and waved me through without calling up, the way she always did. The elevator opened on the 14th floor, and his assistant's desk was empty. That happened sometimes when she went to the copy room or the kitchen down the hall. I didn't think anything of it. His office door was pulled almost shut, not latched, just resting against the frame. I could hear him laughing. It was a particular laugh, low and unhurried, the kind I hadn't heard from him in longer than I could easily say. And then a woman's voice, and then his laugh again, and then quiet. I pushed the door open. I don't know exactly what I expected. I think some part of me expected a logical explanation to materialize the moment I saw it, the way your brain tries to protect you for 1/2 second before reality lands. But there was no half second. There was just my husband of 34 years sitting on his office couch with a woman I recognized from the firm's website, a junior partner 20 years younger than me, her hand on his knee and his hand covering hers. They both looked up. He said my name. I turned around and walked back to the elevator. He followed me into the hallway, calling my name, and I pressed the button and stared at the seam between the elevator doors and did not turn around once. The elevator came. I got in. The doors closed. I looked at my reflection in the brushed steel and I thought, very clearly, I am 63 years old, and I just sold my practice and my husband is having an affair. Both things were true at the same time. That's the part that kept snagging on something in my chest the whole drive home. I want to be honest about what the next week looked like, because I've seen the way these stories get told. The wronged woman who holds herself together with perfect dignity, who never raises her voice, who has a witty comeback ready. That wasn't me. I drove home and I sat at the kitchen table and I cried until I was dehydrated. I called my younger sister Fern and she drove 40 minutes to sit with me and she didn't say much, which was the exact right thing to do. I ate crackers for dinner because I couldn't manage anything else. I took a sleeping pill and I slept 11 hours and I woke up and the first thing I felt was that particular brand of grief that hits before you're fully conscious, before you remember why, and then you remember why. He texted that night, then called, then texted again. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand, the way he did in his meetings. Here is what I did not do. I did not call him back. I did not let him explain. Not yet. Not before I called someone else first. My attorney's name is Greta. She handles family law now. I'd known her for 15 years through professional circles, and the morning after I found out, I called her before I'd even had coffee. I told her what happened. I told her about the sale. I told her I needed to understand exactly where I stood before I had a single conversation with my husband about any of it. Greta asked me a lot of questions I didn't know how to answer yet. Were we likely to reconcile? I didn't know. Had I deposited the proceeds anywhere? Not yet. They were sitting in the operating account for another 48 hours before the wire completed. Did he know about the sale? That last question sat with me. He knew in general terms. We'd talked about the possibility of selling for years. It had always been someday. But the number, the timeline, the fact that it had actually closed that day, I hadn't told him. He didn't know the wire had gone through. He didn't know the amount. Greta told me to keep it that way for now. Get the money into an account in my name only. Meet with her properly before I said anything to him. Don't make any decisions about the marriage from a place of fresh shock. I did all of that. I'm not going to pretend it felt powerful or strategic. It felt like moving through water, slow and heavy. But I did it. And then about 10 days later, I agreed to talk to him. He came to the house on a Saturday morning. I'd asked my sister to be somewhere she could reach her phone. He looked like he hadn't slept well, which I noticed and then felt angry at myself for noticing. Old habits of caring about someone don't switch off because you want them to. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table I'd cried at 10 days before, and he talked for a long time. He said it had been going on for 2 years. He said he hadn't meant for it to happen. He said he'd been feeling disconnected from me, that the years I spent building the practice had taken something from us, that he'd felt peripheral to my life. He said he was sorry. He said it several times. He said he wanted to try counseling. I listened. I let him finish. And then I said, I know you've been feeling disconnected. I'd like to talk about that, actually. But first I want to tell you something. The sale closed 10 days ago. He nodded. He knew I'd been in the final stages. And I told him the number. I want to explain why I told him. I've thought about this a lot because plenty of people would say I shouldn't have, and maybe they're right from a purely strategic standpoint. But I needed to see who he would be in that moment. I needed the information. We'd been married for 34 years, and I still loved parts of him, or parts of who he'd been. And I needed to know whether the man sitting across from my kitchen table was capable of hearing that number and staying present, staying focused on what actually mattered. He was quiet for about 4 seconds, and then he said, we should probably think carefully about the divorce settlement. Not, I'm so proud of you. Not, that's incredible, you did it. Not even a moment of genuine reaction to the magnitude of what I'd just told him. 41 years in 4 words, $8.5 million gone. Just the immediate pivot to his share. I had my answer. I thanked him for coming. I told him I'd have Greta contact his attorney. I walked him to the door. He stood on the porch for a moment, like he was waiting for something else. Some opening, and I said, drive safe, and I closed the door. I stood in the entryway for a while after that. The house was very quiet. The afternoon light was coming through the side light windows the way it does in October, low and golden, and I looked at the coat hooks by the door where his jackets had hung for 30 years, and I thought, I'm going to be all right. The divorce took 14 months. Greta was thorough, and so was his attorney, and there were some contested points around what counted as marital assets versus what I'd built independently. The practice had been mine before we married. I had documentation going back decades, and Greta established clearly that the goodwill and patient base and 35 years of my clinical labor were not community property in any meaningful sense. He received a settlement that was fair by the law's definition. I walked away with what I'd earned. I won't tell you the process was clean or painless. There were weeks I called Fern crying at midnight. There were holidays that first year that felt like open wounds. My daughter, who lives in Portland with her family, flew out twice just to be with me, and I will never forget sitting on my back porch with her in the cold November air, both of us wrapped in blankets, her just holding my hand and not needing to say anything. My son was angrier than I was for a while, and managing his anger while navigating my own grief took energy I didn't always have. But here is the thing about being 63 and starting over. You know yourself in a way you didn't at 30. You know what you can survive. You've already survived things. A father with a long illness, the early lean years of a practice that almost failed twice, a miscarriage nobody outside the family knew about. You have a record of your own resilience you can refer back to. I started taking Italian lessons. It was something I'd always meant to do and never had time for, or told myself I didn't. My instructor is a woman named, I'm not going to tell you because she'd be mortified, but she's 71 and has the most precise sense of humor I've ever encountered, and we've become actual friends. I eat dinner at her house twice a month now. I traveled. I went to the coast of Maine in April, which I'd always thought was a cold weather cliché, and turned out to be exactly what I needed. I walked along the water every morning before breakfast, and I let my mind go quiet in a way it hadn't in years. I went to see my college roommate in Albuquerque, and we stayed up until 1 in the morning talking the way we used to, the way you can only talk with someone who has known you since you were 19 years old. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, a man I'd known peripherally for years. He was the husband of a patient, someone I'd seen at a few community fundraisers, reached out to ask if I'd want to have coffee. He'd lost his wife 2 years earlier. He was thoughtful and funny, and he asked real questions and listened to the answers. We had coffee twice, and then dinner, and then more dinners. And I'm not going to make this into something bigger than it is. It was just the unexpected discovery that the part of me that wanted to share a meal with someone, to tell someone about my day, was still there, still working, hadn't been burned out by what happened. My daughter called me one Sunday evening, about a year after everything, and asked how I was really doing. Not the version I gave to people at parties, the fine and grateful version, but really. I thought about it for a moment. I told her I was better than fine. I told her I was genuinely, unexpectedly glad to be in this particular chapter of my life. Not grateful for what happened, not one of those stories where the betrayal turns out to be a gift in disguise, because I don't believe in that framing and I won't pretend to. Something was taken from me that can't be fully accounted for. 34 years, a version of my life that I thought I understood. That's real. But something was also left, and what was left turned out to be enough. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, "Mum, I think you might be the most resilient person I know." I told her that was the nicest thing she'd ever said to me, which made her laugh, and we talked for another hour while I sat on my back porch in the evening light with a glass of wine, watching the fireflies come up in the garden, thinking that 63 is not an ending, not even close, and that the woman who built a practice from a leaking fish tank and brown carpet is still very much here, and she is just getting started. I think about the parking garage a lot. The 20 minutes I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel after signing those papers. At the time, I thought I was just catching my breath. Looking back, I think I was standing at a door I didn't know was there yet, between the life I'd built according to one set of assumptions and the life that was actually waiting for me. What happened next wasn't fair. I want to say that plainly because I've heard too many versions of this kind of story that try to wrap the pain in a lesson so quickly that the pain doesn't get its due. My husband made choices over 2 years that were dishonest and deliberate. That's on him. The consequences that followed, for both of us, flowed directly from those choices, not from fate, not from some abstract balancing of the universe, just from the simple, unglamorous fact that what we do shapes what comes next. His actions created a reality. I had to decide what to do inside that reality. What I'm proud of is not that I survived it. Surviving isn't a virtue, it's just what time does if you let it. What I'm proud of is that I didn't make decisions from panic. Calling Greta before I caught him back. That was the clearest-headed thing I did in the worst week of my life. I didn't know if I wanted to save the marriage or end it, but I knew I needed to understand my position before I sat across a table from someone who had already proven he could keep secrets. That's not coldness. That's what it looks like to think straight when every instinct is telling you to either run or collapse. And the thing I keep coming back to, I built that practice. I built it from a 2-room office with brown carpet and a fish tank that leaked, over 41 years with my own hands and my own judgment and a stubbornness my sister has always found both admirable and exhausting. Nobody gave it to me. When my husband heard the number and his first thought was the settlement, what he was really revealing was that he had never quite understood what the number meant, that it wasn't luck or timing or circumstance. It was character accumulated over decades. You can't take that in a divorce. It doesn't transfer. I'm 63. When people my age talk about starting over, there's often this undertone of apology, like it's slightly embarrassing to want things at this stage, slightly indulgent to believe the good parts are still ahead. I don't feel that way. I feel like the woman who survived lean years and a near-failed practice and a husband who underestimated her for longer than she'd like to admit has earned the right to want exactly what she wants. Italian lessons, mornings on the coast of Maine, dinners with someone who asks real questions and listens to the answers. My daughter said I was the most resilient person she knows. I told her it was the nicest thing she'd ever said. But what I was really thinking was, resilience isn't the point. The point is integrity. Showing up the same way whether anyone is watching or not, building things that are genuinely yours, and when the ground shifts beneath you, finding out that you're still standing on something solid. That something is you. It was always you. The fireflies came up in the garden that evening while we talked. I watched them and I thought, 63 is not a footnote. It's a chapter I haven't finished writing yet.